before that road went in, and I think today it seems to be operating quite well.
May I address that just a minute, Councilman Beck? That's it's a very fair statement to say there are a number of residents that are concerned, and Dave, I'll bet, has met with this group 3 or 4 at least times, and I've met several times with them as well. And it's a great realization moment for all of us that we need to pay attention to what's in the general plan. And these are residents that feel in many ways that they didn't know this road was there and it was planned all of these years. And so we've encouraged these residents to actually use the process that we have. We have a process in the city to amend the plan. And we've encouraged them to actually go through that process, take it before the Planning Commission, and take it before the council. It's my feeling that I need to move forward, I being the administration needs to move forward and put this road in. At the same time, we do have procedures in place that if that's the wrong decision, that they can appeal to and go through the Planning Commission and the City Council to get that changed. Although we need to make moves on this road now because of the pipeline, we've told those residents that we wouldn't lay asphalt until they had a chance to go through that process. So we can't completely stop moving forward on the road because of the pipeline, but we have allowed that no asphalt would go down until they go through that process. Life will forever be different for them no matter what because of the pipeline. The pipeline's going through, it's taking out the trees, there will be a fence put in by the hospital. That they know and they're dealing with. The question is, are there other options for this road? So hopefully we've taken into account these homes and their concerns. We're trying to be very sensitive to them and at the same time move forward with something that's been in our plans for a long time.
If they are successful in modifying the plan, would that make this money more or less wasted? I guess I'm asking, will there be some costs to us if we...
Well, I think at that point in time we'd have to look. I don't think it would make the money wasted. It would make a difference of how that property were utilized, whether or not that the decision was made to, incorporate that back into the hospital or back into those adjoining residences. I think that could be done either way, but it would give the city the opportunity to make that decision if they felt like that was the right decision at that point in time.
Dave, Dave's negotiated with the hospitals. Is it fair to say they would just as soon not sell this property? And so if the city deemed it wasn't needed, there's no guarantee that they would buy it, but they're certainly not anxious to give it up.
No, and that's absolutely right. The hospital was very reluctant to have this right-of-way through their property, but felt like it was since it was part of our general plan, part of our street master plan, and it was in the interest of the community, and so that's the reason why they've agreed to go ahead and do what they've done.
I have a question. So the wall that would be built, if the road were to go in, the wall that would be built on the backside would be mitigating for the noises from the street, cars going down back and forth on that. Is that what the purpose of the wall would be, or?
Well, it would be more just a fence between the property line of these residents and the street.
So, but it would be a solid concrete type wall?
What the hospital has asked from Central Utah is they have asked to have an 8-foot wall on the hospital side of the roadway to separate the hospital property from the road. And on the opposite side of the road next to the neighborhood, the thought was if we had something that complemented that, but maybe not as massive as an 8-foot wall, that would be more compatible with the neighborhood.
And what about the street lights that would be along that roadway? Does that create a situation where you've got a street light on your front yard and your backyard?
Whether or not there'd be street lights would just all be determined in design. And one of the commitments that we have made to the neighborhood is if we do proceed with a street, that they would be involved, have input into that process through the design of what was included in that street.
Uh-huh. So there would be some option as far as that wall that was adjacent to their property as to whether or not it was tall enough or too tall to block their view of Timpanogos or something like that.
Yeah, the situation with the wall is that it's also one of those items that's included in the Central Utah project contract, and so any changes to that would need to happen fairly soon.
Oh.
May I just add to a couple of points, is the wall will come in with or without the road. The hospital, if the road doesn't go in, the hospital still wants a wall there. So
That's on the other side of the road, street.
well, if there is no road, then it'll be pushed right up to the residents'
Oh, okay.
boundary. And that's part of saying life for them has changed, really, no matter what
Right.
happens. Dave's commitment is very accurate, his comment about our commitment. We've gone so far as to tell the neighborhood that you can get involved in whether or not it's a wall, sidewalk, park strip, sidewalk, and things like that, so that the cars are moved as far away as possible from their homes, even compromising what would be over on the other side of the street and making it smaller so that we can have more space over on the side of the homes. So every accommodation that can be made is being made if that road goes in for the neighbors.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Dayton, did I see?
Yes, thank you. I see concrete walls, they tend to echo sound as well. So even though they'll keep out some sound, they certainly will be creating sound. And are trees going to be planted by the Central Utah project as well, along there as a buffer?
No, as part of the street design, we would also have included in that project at a minimum a 7-foot planter strip with trees.
That would be on
residential
the
side.
residential side.
Yes,
7-foot planter, and who's going to maintain the planter?
and it would likely be maintained by the city.
All right. And they're notoriously difficult to maintain, so that's why I'm asking the question on the planter. And might it be better to have it pushed back and have the people have the trees somehow part of their property instead, so they're maintaining the trees?
And that could be looked at in the design as well as to whether or not it made sense to continue the planter. The reason I think why we would recommend the planter at this point in time would be to have a separation for pedestrians on the sidewalk from the roadway.
If you did xeriscape, then you could probably come up with some good planting that won't affect long-term the need for maintenance.
Continued maintenance.
Yeah.
The Parks Department currently maintains the shrubbery planter area along 300 South in this same area, and so we think it would be somewhat similar to that in requiring hopefully very, very little maintenance.
All right, and then the next question is, how much was the hospital property itself that was part of this? How much of the hospital property is being acquired by CUP?
CUP is not acquiring any. Okay, all of the property for the hospital that's being acquired is being acquired by the city.
All right, well, there's a usage thing happening here, and somebody's going to put some pipes underneath some property, and what property is it that's going to be utilized for that?
Okay.
How much of it is there?
Central Utah, of the net acreage that the city would be acquiring from the hospital is 2.788 acres of property.
Sure, but if you're talking about a width, a swath,
Yes, about 72 feet wide.
72 feet wide.
Yes.
From what is currently,
From 300 South at 1350 East, following the boundary of the state hospital out to Seven Peaks and Center Street.
all right.
Of that property, the state hospital or the Central Utah will be acquiring a permanent easement on about 1.25 acres and a temporary construction easement on about 4.2 acres of property.
Is it possible to narrow the, well, what you've got now is a sidewalk, one bike lane, two travel lanes. How much space is that? Is it 52 feet? Where are we at that point?
What we have on Slate Canyon Drive is we currently have 48 feet of asphalt. Again, that's one of
Can
those.
you narrow it down with this
and
area?
that may be something that we could look at in design to be able to move that roadway a little bit further away from the residences.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
sorry to keep jumping in, but I think there's been a lot of discussions with the neighborhood I'm trying to bring into this conversation. We actually asked Dave to see if he could negotiate additional land from the hospital to try to give even a larger buffer to the residents, and we got a no from the hospital on that one. And the intent was if we could put that further away and maybe even put that extra space in their backyards, it would have been a good idea, but we couldn't acquire the land to do that.
Great, thank you, Mayor.
But if we did narrow the road, there'd be a possibility of that moving it further away, correct?
Yes. And exactly how that is, whether or not there's a little bit of a narrow strip of property that could go back into those backyards, or whether we have a wider buffer, in the city right-of-way, there's a lot of different things that we could look at.
Thank you.
The cost of doing a narrower road wouldn't be too bad either. Is that correct?
It would reduce the
Cost of it.
street cost somewhat, yes.
Yeah.
One more question.
Okay.
As they make the turn off of 1350 East and they make that western turn down the back of those yards, is that going to be a radius, or will that be a 90-degree turn?
What we are proposing, if we move forward with that, is that we would install a roundabout at the intersection of 1350 East and 300 South, as well as another roundabout at Center Street and Seven Peaks Boulevard, and that we would realign particularly the Center Street intersection from how it is kind of a curved intersection right now.
And so as they left the roundabout going north, then will it be a radius turn or a...
Yes.
And then as they get down to the westernmost part of the hospital property, that'll be another radius type turn?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. Any other questions, council members? Seeing none, I call for a motion to move this to our October 19th meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Turley.
I'd like to also state that I would like to see if we can have a couple of these things firmed up, even though I know the mayor's been having conversations. I would like to understand a little bit more of the depth of the conversations. And they came to me when we were having the Slate Canyon meeting. A number of the people did, and were asking, where did this come from? We didn't know about it, which often happens. Most residents aren't going to go, when they buy a house, most residents are not going to go to the general plan and start reading through it. That's just not going to happen, And so even though it's incumbent upon each individual to do that, unless we want to become a lawyer-based state like New Jersey, where I once lived, where the lawyer goes through and checks every law to make sure that it's all taken care of, then, to listen to the voices of these people now, recognizing that there has been some limited communication in their perspective about this, even though, we may have been talking about it for a number of years, I think it would be beneficial. And also just for me, so that I can be more conversant with what the conversations have been in talking with individuals, so it's not a starting point every time the conversation comes.
Great. So we have a motion, and Mrs. Dayton seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Looks like motion carries with 4 in favor and Mr. Beck opposed and Ms. Hall Everett excused. Thank you.